a personal perspective. I have attention deficit disorder, ADD. I discovered I had ADD when I was 31 years old, near the end of my training in child psychiatry at the Massachusetts Mental Health Center in Boston. As my teacher in neuropsychiatry began to describe ADD in a series of morning lectures during a steamy Boston summer, I had one of the great aha experiences of my life. There are some children, she said, who chronically daydream. They are often very bright, but they have trouble attending to any one topic for very long. They are full of energy and have trouble staying put. They can be quite impulsive in saying or doing whatever comes to mind, and they find distractions impossible to resist. So there's a name for what I am, I thought to myself with relief and mounting excitement. There's a term for it, a diagnosis, an actual condition, when all along I'd thought I was just slightly daft. As the lectures progressed, I devoured everything I could read on the topic. Not only did I realize that I had ADD, but I recognized the syndrome in the behavior of several members of my family as well, which made sense, since it is genetically influenced. Then I heard Dr. Paul Wender, a pioneer in the field, give a talk, and soon after I read his book. I felt as if a boulder had been lifted from my back. I wasn't all the names I'd been called in grade school: a daydreamer, lazy, an underachiever, a space shot, and I didn't have some repressed unconscious conflict that made me impatient and action-oriented. What I had was an inherited neurological syndrome characterized by easy distractibility, low tolerance for frustration or boredom, a greater-than-average tendency to say or do whatever came to mind, called impulsivity in the diagnostic manual, and a predilection for situations of high intensity. Most of all, I had a name for the overflow of energy I so often felt, the highly charged, psyched-up feeling that infused many of my waking hours in both formative and frustrating ways. At last, there was a term to explain the conversations I tuned out of, involuntarily, for no apparent reason, for the rage I felt, and the times I broke pencils and threw them around the room when I didn't immediately grasp a concept in grade school, for the 7 attempts it can take me to read a page of a novel, for the non sequiturs my wife says I've offered in the midst of intimate conversation, for forgetting the task at hand as I go off on the wings of a new thought or off in search of what I forgot, for the love of the chase, the new project, the hot idea, for the love of, the need for, something highly stimulating and riveting, whether it's doing psychotherapy with a paranoid, violent man or putting a high-stakes bet down at the racetrack. At last, I had a name for these parts of me, parts I had chalked up to temperament or neurosis. Now, with a name rooted in neurobiology, I could begin to make sense of, in a forgiving way, parts of myself that had often frustrated or scared me. I don't like the term attention deficit disorder, although it sure beats its predecessor, minimal brain dysfunction. Technically, the correct current diagnostic label is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which incorporates the symptom of hyperactivity into the diagnosis. It is an imperfect label for several reasons. The syndrome is not one of attention deficit, but of attention inconsistency. Most of us with ADD can in fact hyperfocus at times. Hyperactivity may or may not be present. In fact, some children and adults with ADD are quite dreamy and quiet. The very word hyperactivity is ambiguous. Sedate evaluators label some simply active individuals hyperactive, thus incorrectly diagnosing a normal state. Finally, the word disorder puts the syndrome entirely in the domain of pathology, where it should not entirely be.